Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about a case that is really disturbing and I'm surprised that there isn't more out there about it. I'm surprised more people haven't talked about it because there's a lot of twists and turns, a lot of drama, marriage problems, affairs, money troubles, love triangles, the whole nine. This case has it. And most of the information I was able to track down was gained from official court documents, but I have to admit, they were kind of hard to find, and before I was able to locate them, there just wasn't a lot I could find out there that gave me specifics, specific timelines, specific conversations, etc. There was also a lot of inaccurate reporting, different news outlets reporting completely different facts. Before we get started, let's have a word from the sponsor of this video, Harry's. What do you buy for the guy or gal who seemingly has it all? More Christmas socks, another tie. Why don't you get them something high quality that they'll actually use? I have so many of these people in my life, and I think they're going to love what I've chosen to gift them for the holidays this year. This is the Winston gift set from Harry's, and it includes the limited edition holiday Winston handle that has the option to engrave, and anytime there is an option to engrave, I will take it. It also comes with 3 German-engineered blade cartridges, each with a flex hinge and lubricating strip to give the most comfortable and close shave possible. There's also a foaming shave gel with aloe and a blade cover to keep those blades sharp for longer. There are many different gift sets to choose from for yourself or a loved one, and as a special offer to you, we have partnered with Harry's to give you $5 off a holiday shave set plus free shipping, which means you can have the perfect present starting as low as $15 with this discount. All you have to do is click the link in the description box or go to harrys.com/Stephanie. You will also be giving the gift of savings since razor refills start at only $2. My husband and I have been using Harry's for years. I sent my daughter to college with her own Harry's starter set, and this year for Christmas there are at least 3 others on my nice list who will be receiving their very own Harry's holiday set. Harry's is a gift you can feel good about since they donate 1% of every sale to organizations that promote better mental health care. And you all know I have said before, I don't take on sponsors unless I actually use the product myself and believe in it, and I will never go back to using any other razors or blades. I'll never go back to buying blades in the store. Harry's blades are such high quality. I get so many shaves out of them, and they deliver the refills right to my front door, so there's never going to be a situation where I run out of fresh blades and I have to shave with a dull one, because then my shower becomes the scene of a true crime. If you're interested in getting the gift of a perfect shave for yourself or someone you love, go to harrys.com/Stephanie to get $5 off a holiday shave set plus free shipping while supplies last. Thank you so much to Harry's for sponsoring this video, and let's dive right in. Today, we are talking about a man named Gavin Smith. Before his life took a path that made him the subject of a true crime video on YouTube, Gavin was headed towards a very bright future. He was described as being the ultimate California guy. Sandy hair, tanned skin, and this huge smile with perfect white teeth. Even as a man in his 50s, he still stood at 6'6" with washboard abs. He was the star player on his high school basketball team, and when he was a senior in 1973, he was named second-team All-American by Parade magazine. After high school, Gavin attended UCLA, where he played college basketball for John Wooden, one of the best college basketball coaches of all time. In 1975, during Gavin's sophomore year, he would be on the team when Wooden and UCLA won the NCAA championship. It was kind of a surprise to everyone when Gavin did not get drafted out of college for the pros, and after graduating for UCLA, Gavin went to Hawaii, where he played for the Rainbow Warriors for a season, gaining a reputation for wearing this white headband and bringing his dog to practice. He was a good player. He had a lot of potential. But after Hawaii, he returned to California, where he tried his hand at acting. He got some bit parts here and there. He was even working as a stuntman for a while before he injured the lumbar area of his spine during a stunt, resulting in chronic back pain that he was prescribed pain medication for. And as the story has so often gone before, Gavin developed a dependency on these pills. In January of 1989, while serving tables at a restaurant, Gavin met Lisa, and they experienced a whirlwind romance. By June, they were already planning their wedding, and they were married by November and started having babies almost immediately after the I do's. The happy couple would go on to have 3 strapping young boys, all athletic with big smiles like their father, but Gavin was also a bit of a free spirit. He was a lot of fun to be around. He was romantic and spontaneous, but he didn't take himself or life very seriously. Lisa ran her own business and she made good money, so while he took small acting jobs and worked as a golf caddy, she supported the family. But when she became pregnant with their 3rd son, she told her husband it was time to be an adult and get a real job so that he could pitch in a real way. So Gavin put his dreams of being in front of the camera aside for the time being, and at the age of 40, he was hired by 20th Century Fox. He started at the bottom, but he was charismatic, smart, and a fast learner. And he quickly moved up at the company, eventually working in their distribution center, making sure that movies would go out to all the theaters in time for their scheduled showings, and within no time, he was a regional branch manager for theaters in Dallas and Oklahoma City, working out of Fox's Calabasas offices. Lisa was finally able to stop working and focus on being a mother full-time, and everything seemed to be going well. But it also seemed that the more money Gavin made, the more he spent, and he had developed a lifestyle he really couldn't afford as he continued down the path of opioid addiction. Gavin and Lisa had bought their home before the market crashed in 2008, and afterwards the value of the house had plummeted. So they were basically stuck with this large mortgage payment on a house that they couldn't even sell if they wanted to because it wouldn't have made enough money to even pay what they owed on it. On top of that, Gavin was considering retiring from his good-paying job with Fox and taking another shot at acting. Lisa begged him to reconsider. They had bills to pay, they were in debt already, and they still had 3 sons to put through college. Gavin and Lisa began to argue about money, how it would be made, how it would be spent, how they didn't have enough of it. Lisa, a trained accountant, had gone through their financial papers and discovered how bad it actually was. Although Gavin made $180,000 a year at Fox, they didn't have enough money to pay their bills because Gavin had spent his year-end bonus from Fox and also taken money out of his pension fund. It seemed as if Gavin was going through some kind of midlife crisis. He had even developed a wandering eye. Their relationship had gone through its ups and downs. They'd always come back to each other after, a few brief separations, but this time was different. On April 13th, 2012, Gavin packed a suitcase with some of his belongings and left his family home. One of his friends and colleagues found him sleeping at the office and invited him to stay with her until he and Lisa worked things out. It was supposed to be a temporary situation. Gavin had told his children that everything was going to be okay, he was still going to be there for them, and they would all have dinner together every weekend. And for a few weeks, everything was okay. But on the morning of May 2nd, Gavin did not show up to pick the kids up and bring them to school, which was very unusual for him. He also never made it to work that day. Lisa went to the police and reported her estranged husband missing, but at first, no one really took her seriously. Gavin was a 57-year-old man. He was in amazing shape, he was successful, and he was also newly single, technically. He was probably just blowing off some steam with a busty young woman in a Palm Springs hotel. He'd be back when he was ready. But after several days passed and he had not returned, a missing persons report was filed and an APB was put out on his jet black Mercedes. Now, Gavin had last been seen by the friend he was staying with. He had just come back from a business trip in Las Vegas for a weekend, and he told his friend he was going to be staying in for the night, watching TV and just relaxing, so she went to bed. When she woke up the next morning, Gavin was not in his room and his car wasn't in the driveway, so she assumed he had just left for work early. A search of his cell phone records showed that his plans for the night before had been less casual than he had claimed. Disagreements about money were not the only thing that had caused Lisa to ask her husband of over 18 years to leave. He'd been unfaithful to her on more than one occasion with more than one woman. On March 1st of 2008, Gavin had enrolled in an outpatient drug rehabilitation program. By the summer of 2009, he'd gotten control of his addiction, and he'd become a group leader, assisting new patients who arrived at the facility. One of these new patients was a woman named Chandrika, a beautiful woman in her 30s who was struggling with alcoholism. The two became friends, which eventually led to a romantic relationship. Chandrika had her own set of problems outside from her addiction. She was married to a man named John Creech, who had a violent temper and a criminal background. In 2010, John had been picked up by police when he sold bricks of cocaine to a man who had more than 2,500 oxycodone tablets in his vehicle. After this, John Creech's home and business were searched, and authorities uncovered, among other things, meth, 25 pounds of packaged marijuana, a digital money counter, a pay-and-owe ledger, and more than $75,000 in cash. John admitted to police that he was a middleman between drug producers and lower-level street dealers, and he had pleaded no contest to one count of selling and transporting cocaine. Well, John Creech found out his wife Chandrika was stepping out on him with someone she had met at rehab when he saw Gavin's number on her cell phone bill, and he was obviously not happy about it. Chandrika testified that when John found out about Gavin, he shoved her around, slammed her head into multiple objects, and he was just really violent with her. She also claimed that John had told her he'd paid Gavin a visit at the rehab center, warning the older man to stay away from his wife. At this point, Gavin and Chandrika did cease contact with each other, and the relationship seems to have ended. Gavin's wife, Lisa, had also been made aware of her husband's intimate relationship with another man's wife. Gavin and Lisa started going to counseling, and she thought that his tryst with Chandrika was just another symptom of a midlife crisis. Gavin, already an avid gym goer, had started working out even more and dressing like a 20-year-old to go to rehab meetings. Gavin told his wife that he had ended things with Chandrika, and Gavin and Lisa actually went on a trip to Hawaii. Things were going good in the bedroom, if you know what I mean. They had recaptured the fire and passion from the early days of their relationship. But then, in 2010, everything hit the fan. Chandrika had started sending Gavin emails that her husband John found. So John sent some emails of his own. He emailed Gavin saying, "I'm going to get you, Gavin. Your wife is getting a copy of these emails. You're effed, you old prick." John did copy Lisa in on these emails, and she confronted Gavin with them. Gavin told Lisa that John was a dangerous drug dealer who had been threatening him, and they both thought it would be a good idea to change Gavin's phone number and email address. This was when Lisa decided to take things into her own hands and put a stop to this whole horrible situation. At least that's what she wanted to happen. On December 7th, 2010, Lisa and two of her sons drove over to the Creech house, where both John and Chandrika lived with their children. They also lived there with Chandrika's sick grandmother and a woman who cared for the grandmother, a woman named Raina Lim. Now, while Lisa waited in the car, her oldest son, Evan, and her youngest son, Austin, walked up to the home of this dangerous drug dealer who'd been threatening their father. And I really want to put myself in the shoes of Lisa. I want to try to be understanding, but I just can't see how sending your children into the den of the wolf is a good idea. I would be so terrified. If I was going to go there, I understand she wanted to kind of talk to John and maybe even Chandrika, like family to family, but I would have gone in with them, if anything. I just don't think I would have ever sent my kids in there alone, but different folks, different strokes, right? So let's keep going. The two boys walked up to the house, they knocked on the door, and they were greeted by a very confused John Creech, who went from confused to pissed off really quickly when he found out who they were. Evan Smith, the oldest, described John Creech as burly, very muscular, and intimidating. Now, it seems that John Creech not only worked out 4 times a week, but he was also taking testosterone and human growth hormone to enhance his natural strength. At this time, Chandrika was home, but she claims the boys never came into the house. She could just hear them talking and crying from inside. Both Evan and Austin apparently broke down in tears, and they apologized on behalf of their entire family for their father's behavior. So imagine you're these kids. You have nothing to do with this situation. You're just trying to be a normal kid, go to school, talk to your girlfriend on the phone, play basketball, whatever it is that teenage boys do. And all of a sudden you have to go to the home of a drug dealer and apologize to this guy for your father sleeping with his wife. It's just such a bad and uncomfortable situation. Austin, the youngest boy, actually told John Creech, "I'm only in 8th grade. I'm too young to lose my dad." It's just heartbreaking. I can't even imagine having to go through that as these kids, or putting my kids through that as either their mother or their father. John Creech informed them that he had been having their father followed, that he knew where Gavin worked, he knew where he went to NA meetings, and he even knew where the kids went to school. But he also said that by coming to him that day, they had saved their father's life. He promised that he would leave Gavin alone and everything would be okay as long as Gavin never contacted Chandrika again. And for a few years, it seemed like everything would be fine. And it seems like Gavin and Chandrika did not talk. But in April of 2012, 2 different women, tied together unwillingly through their love for Gavin Smith, both discovered something that changed their situations. Chandrika Creech found out that her husband was having an affair with an 18-year-old girl who was still in high school. And she basically told her husband, she wanted a separation. She wanted to get a divorce. John and Chandrika did begin this process, but they remained living together in the same house, feeling financially it was the best option for now, but they allegedly slept in different bedrooms. And on April 13th, 2012, Lisa Smith found out that Gavin was having an affair with another woman who went to his rehab facility, a woman named Melanie. At the same time, she also discovered that he had rekindled his relationship with Chandrika. So he was basically with all 3 women at the same time, Lisa, Chandrika, and Melanie. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back for Lisa. She claimed that when she asked him to leave that day, she just wanted to scare him. She kicked him out and she was like, "I can't deal with you cheating. You got to go someplace else." But she loved him and she didn't feel like either of them actually wanted to get divorced. But she also felt, she couldn't keep turning a blind eye to his cheating, and she wanted to send a strong message that he needed to stop, or he would lose her. After leaving the family home, Gavin continued to meet with Chandrika. In mid-April, he drove to pick her up while she was walking her dog near her home. As she was getting into his car, John Creech, who had followed her there, began running towards the car and yelling, so Chandrika jumped into the passenger seat and Gavin sped away. According to Chandrika, John was not violent with her after this. He didn't hit her or anything after she finally came back home. He just made it clear to her that he no longer wanted her seeing Gavin. But she had no intention of letting her husband, who himself was dating someone else, a high school girl, dictate who she would or would not see. At 10 p.m. on the evening of May 1st, Gavin called Chandrika Creech and begged her to meet with him, and she agreed, telling him to meet her in a parking lot that she knew would be private at that time of night. Before Chandrika left the house, she informed both her grandmother's caretaker, Rena Lim, and her estranged husband, John Creech, that she was going out. John told her that if she left the house, he was going to have someone follow her, but she ignored him, I guess, and she got into her Audi at around 11 p.m. and drove away. Now, John did try calling her several times as she was driving away, but once again, she ignored him. And when she got to her destination, where Gavin in his black Mercedes was already waiting for her, she left her cell phone in the Audi, not realizing that her husband had activated a GPS tracking service that AT&T offered so customers could locate other cell phones on the same plan. By the time her phone got the message that she was being tracked, Chandrika was already in Gavin's car, not knowing what was about to happen. Back at the Creech home, John was getting ready to go into battle. He asked Chandrika's grandmother if he could borrow her car, and he drove away in a gold Mazda minivan, speeding towards a romantic rendezvous that he had every intention of interrupting. When he arrived to the parking lot, both Gavin and Chandrika were in the passenger seat of the Mercedes, and it was getting pretty hot and heavy. According to later testimony, John Creech threw open the passenger door and screamed at his wife, asking her what she was doing there. Then John and Gavin began yelling at each other, and then John lunged and began punching Gavin in the face repeatedly. Chandrika claimed she was able to escape the vehicle by crawling over the center console and climbing out the driver's side door, at which point she got into the closest vehicle, which was the gold Mazda. She pulled the Mazda up next to Gavin's car. He was still in the passenger seat, and her husband was still punching him in the head and face so many times she said she lost count. Chandrika claims she screamed at John to stop, that he was going to kill Gavin, but he ignored her, so she yelled at him again that he was going to jail, and this got his attention, causing him to turn towards her and tell her that she was next. Terrified, Chandrika pulled away and drove home, where she ran inside yelling, "He's going to kill me," before locking all the doors of the house, grabbing a knife, and posting up in her grandmother's room. John Creech made it back home, but he had to walk, I assume because Chandrika had taken the Mazda and possibly also had the keys to her Audi with her, and he obviously couldn't drive Gavin's Mercedes anywhere. But when he arrived at the house, he had calmed down. But he was also covered in blood. And he told Chandrika, I'm not going to hurt you. I just need you to give me a ride back to that parking lot so that we can get Gavin to the hospital because he needs medical attention. Chandrika claims that she did drive John back, but dropped him off about a mile away from the parking lot because she didn't want to see what had happened to Gavin. She didn't want to see what he looked like. Now, it's unclear if Gavin Smith was dead when John Creech arrived back at the parking lot, but we do know what happened next. A man named Jorge Velez, who had known John Creech since 2006, started getting calls in the early morning hours of May 2nd, but the caller ID didn't tell him who was calling. So after the 15th call, Jorge picked up to find it was John Creech on the other end of the line. He sounded drunk and said he really needed someone to talk to. So Jorge, thinking that this guy was just having a fight with his wife, said, yeah, come on over. John Creech did drive to Jorge's house and got out of a black Mercedes wearing an inside-out white tank top that had spots of what looked like blood on it. The knuckles on his right hand were swollen, red, and bruised, and he was in quite a state. John asked Jorge if he could park the car there, but Jorge said no, which made John get mad and start pushing him. Jorge told him there was a place they could take the car, his parents' house, so Jorge got into his own car and led the way, with John Creech following in Gavin's Mercedes. When they got there, John asked for paper towels and Windex, and he began cleaning the inside of the car, which Jorge noticed had a lot of blood inside. John Creech specifically focused on cleaning off the steering wheel, the center console, and the driver's door panel, basically any places that his fingerprints could be found. After this, John Creech made another phone call, this time to a man named Stan McQuay, a friend of his who worked out at the same gym. Now, Stan lived in a gated community in Porter Ranch, and he claimed John called him around 6 a.m. asking if he could park a car in his garage. Stan, claiming he didn't know at this time what he was agreeing to, said, yeah, bring the car over and, park it in my garage. When John finally got there, he pulled the Mercedes into the garage and he frantically asked Stan McQuay to help him cover the car with a car cover. As this was happening, Stan looked inside and saw something that he thought looked like a body covered with blankets in the passenger seat. But then John was like, stop looking inside the car. Don't look in the car, just let's get it covered. Then Stan drove John back to the entrance to the neighborhood. Remember, it's a gated community, and Jorge was actually waiting there to bring John home. On the drive from his house to the entrance of the gated community, Stan McQuay asked John, what happened? And John told him, I got into a fight with a man who was sleeping with my wife. He also told Stan that he'd be back in a few hours for the car, and then he got into Jorge's car and they drove off. When Jorge dropped John off at home, John got out of the car and threw a cell phone back into the car, telling Jorge, just get rid of it. According to Jorge, he threw the phone into a garbage can in a McDonald's. Now, when John Creech went inside, he informed his wife, Chandrika, that her lover hadn't made it. He was dead. And the two of them took the clothes that they'd been wearing the night before and burned them in their fireplace. Chandrika claimed she didn't know what to do. She was afraid. She said she told John they should call the police, and he basically told her, listen, we got some options here. You can call the police, but if you do call the police, I'm going to tell them that you were in on this, that you were part of this murder, or I'll just kill you as well. And she believed that he would do that. So Chandrika did not call the police. Chandrika didn't do anything. She just, she kept quiet. But when John did not come back for the Mercedes within a few hours or even within a few days, Stan McQuay started to get a little antsy and upset. He claimed he had never looked into the car after that one time, but he was aware there was a dead body inside of it. And every time he called John to come back and get it out of his garage, his calls were ignored. Eventually, he got a hold of John, and he was like, listen, if you don't come, immediately and take care of this, I'm going to call the police. So, on May 4th, John Creech told Raina Lim, who, remember, lives in the house with him and cares for Chandrika's grandmother. He had her call and rent a U-Haul truck so that he could go and get Gavin's body out of Stan's garage. This is actually what he told her, right? Because later when Raina testified, she admitted she knew that John needed the U-Haul to transport a dead body. This same day, John showed up with the U-Haul, and when Stan looked into the garage, he saw that it didn't seem like John was planning to take the car and the body that day, since he removed Gavin's body from the car and was loading it into the U-Haul, and there was nothing that could be used to remove the car. So Stan went out and he was like, what are you doing? You need to get the car out of here too. I don't want just the body out. The car has to go too. And John told Stan, don't worry, I'm gonna send someone else for the car soon. The next day, John Creech was with his 18-year-old girlfriend, and she mentioned something about the father of a friend from school who had gone missing. John Creech's 18-year-old girlfriend went to school with Gavin Smith's sons. What are the odds? Well, John told her, this is the same guy that my wife has been sleeping with. And at that point, this girl also noticed that John had cuts and scrapes on his hands, injuries he claimed to have sustained while he was three-wheeling. John Creech left that Mercedes in the garage of Stan McQuay for the better part of a month. On June 21st, John had Raina Lim rent a storage unit for him, and then two men showed up at Stan's house with a trailer. They took the Mercedes away and brought it to that storage unit. Stan McQuay would later testify that his garage smelled like rotting flesh for several days after this. Oh no, my garage smells bad. Poor Stan, his garage smells like dead body for days. You let a convicted drug dealer and a violent criminal store a stolen car and a dead body inside your garage for way longer than you should have. Okay, so you kind of deserve that your garage smells bad for a couple of days. Go in there with some Febreze, you'll be fine. Gavin Smith is dead and you helped hide his body. I just don't see what you're complaining about here. After their father had gone missing and they hadn't heard from him for several days, Evan and Austin let the police know about their interaction with John Creech from 2 years prior, making John a person of interest in the case. Gavin's wife, Lisa, also started doing her own investigation. She called her husband's sponsor and asked if they knew Chandrika's number. And once she had Chandrika's number, she texted it. But the person didn't text back. She got a call back from Chandrika's number. But when she answered the call, there was only silence on the other end, which prompted Lisa to say, this is an emergency. Do you know Gavin Smith? Someone answered and said no, but Lisa felt that it was a man trying to sound like a woman. It wasn't long before police were able to track down John's accomplices, or at least those who were with him that night and aided him in some way with the disposal or the hiding of Gavin's body, as well as keeping everything a secret after that night. We have Chandrika, of course, who's, claims to have been there when it started. Raina Lynn, who rented the U-Haul and the storage unit and admitted to knowing that John had killed Gavin. Jorge Velez, who had been there while John was cleaning copious amounts of blood out of a car that did not belong to him. Stan McQuay, who had housed the body in his garage for several days. Poor Stan. These people were given full immunity for their testimony against John Creech during a future trial, and Raina Lynn was able to lead police to the storage unit where the Mercedes was being hidden. There were bloodstains inside the car, as well as on the rear bumper, and the blood was a match for Gavin Smith. The front license plate was missing from the car, but the screws that would be used to attach a license plate were still there, and I guess John Creech hadn't considered that when he went to town with Windex because his DNA was found on one of those screws. Authorities had the car by February of 2013, and there was a strong case against John Creech, but they still didn't have a body. And that would remain the status of the investigation until a year and a half later, when a man walking his dog through Angeles National Forest found a partial human skull near a dirt path. A few yards south of where this skull was found, investigators located human remains wrapped in a comforter, plastic sheeting, and duct tape placed in a shallow grave. The body was severely skeletalized, and it appeared that the skull had been removed from this shallow grave by animals. These were the remains of Gavin Smith, and the medical examiner determined he died from blunt cranial facial trauma, most likely caused by fists. So John Creech beat this man to death. At this point, John could not really deny that he'd killed Gavin Smith, but he still attempted to explain to the jury what had happened, and his story differed from that of Chandrika's. He said that his wife was an alcoholic and a cheater, and he had never told Gavin's sons that he'd planned to kill their father. He'd simply told them that if Gavin stopped contacting Chandrika, everything would be fine, which I think is pretty much a subtle way of saying, I'm going to kill your father if he keeps talking to my wife. But okay, this is just my opinion, don't come for me. John said that he and Chandrika had pretty much been over since January of 2012, and by the following March, they had both agreed that their marriage should come to an end. On the evening of May 1st, 2012, John had found his wife passed out after drinking too much with a cigarette still in her hand. He'd woken her up, she'd started cooking food, and he sat down on the couch and dozed off. When he woke up, he was alarmed to find that Chandrika was gone, and he was worried about her, which is why he activated the Family Finder app on his AT&T account. He followed the signal, which led him to a parking lot where Chandrika's car was parked. But she wasn't in her car. She was in another car with a man he'd never seen before. He claimed he had not snuck up on the lovebirds, but instead he knocked on the door of the car, and Chandrika opened the door, asking him what he was doing there. At that point, John Creech claimed that he grabbed a set of keys off the dashboard. Allegedly, they were the keys to Chandrika's Audi, and then he threw them into some bushes, telling Chandrika to walk home and sober up. At this point, as Chandrika was looking around for her keys, Gavin, still in the car, started swearing at John, who told him to mind his own business. And as John leaned inside the car to say this, Gavin took a swing, punching John in the face. So in John Creech's version of the story, he's worried about his wife, who's an alcoholic. He doesn't want her driving. He finds her and he throws her keys in the bushes so that she can walk home and sober up. I don't know why he didn't just keep the keys on his person so that she couldn't drive, but it's probably more dramatic to throw your keys in the bushes. And he's not the one that throws the first punch, right? He's not there to fight. He's just there to help his wife, his estranged wife. And he gets punched first by Gavin, so he's trying to defend himself when he fights back. John claimed that Gavin had him by his throat and was trying to poke his eyes out with his thumbs. So John tried to fishhook Gavin, but ended up getting his thumb bit instead. And at this point, they both started punching each other before John kind of rolled out of the car and Gavin got out of the car spitting out blood. And he walked from the passenger seat around to the driver's seat while Chandrika sped away in the Mazda. So at this point, John decided to then start looking through the bushes so he could find Chandrika's keys that he had thrown because she just took the car he came in. But then he noticed that Chandrika was driving back towards him in the car. So he went to see if the doors to her Audi were unlocked. I wonder if he thought she was going to hit him with the car. And he was like, let me get into this Audi so I can actually be safe. I'm not sure. He doesn't explain that. But as he's doing this, trying to get into the Audi, he claims that Gavin Smith came running at him with an instrument that he described as a hammer with an ice pick on the end. They punched each other some more. They rolled around on the ground, and John was able to get the hammer ice pick thing away from Gavin. So Gavin went back and got into his car with blood pouring from his nose. Chandrika, still in the gold Mazda minivan, left the parking lot, to go home. So John walked home with the hammer ice pick thing, and when he got home, he set it down on the ground before going inside. He claims the house wasn't locked up like Fort Knox, as Chandrika had claimed. It was wide open, so he goes inside. And he admitted that Chandrika had driven him back to the parking lot, but the purpose was so that he could get her Audi and bring it back home. Now, as John was walking towards the Audi, he could see Gavin still inside his Mercedes, and he noticed that Gavin's eyes and mouth were wide open. So John went over to the car, the Mercedes, and he started saying Gavin's name, Gavin, Gavin, Gavin. But he got no response, and after shining a flashlight into his eyes, he realized Gavin might need medical help, but John did not call the police. John did not bring Gavin to the hospital. He drove Chandrika's Audi home because at this time he was out on bail and he didn't want to get into trouble. John Creech testified that he went back a third time, and at this point he knew Gavin was dead. So he just planned to find a place to hide the car and the body until he could talk to his lawyer. John Creech also claimed that he had nothing to do with renting the storage unit. He was already back in jail by the time the car was moved from Stan McQuay's house to the storage unit, and he claimed that it was a collaborative effort between Chandrika and Raina Lim. As for the hammer ice pick thing, John said that he'd thrown it over a fence someplace near his house, but he was not doing this to hide evidence because there was no blood on it or anything. He just wanted to put it somewhere that he knew it would be okay in case the police needed it. Now remember, John Creech was already facing some time for his previous criminal acts, and he was already in prison by the time he was charged with the murder of Gavin Smith. The jury found John Creech not guilty of first-degree murder, but they did find him guilty of voluntary manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 11 years in prison. I imagine he was given this sentence because his lawyers did a pretty good job of proving the death had happened in the heat of passion and with provocation. So first-degree murder needs to be willful and premeditated. Second-degree murder needs to be intentional, not premeditated, but also not committed in a reasonable heat of passion. So if you can prove that the murder was committed in a reasonable heat of passion, then it's not first-degree or second-degree murder. The Smith family had already experienced a lot of heartbreak and more significant financial troubles after the court case was settled. Although there was some closure as far as what had happened to Gavin, it didn't make everything magically better. Lisa could still not pay the mortgage, and eventually the family left California. But the oldest son does have his own claim to fame, becoming a reality television star. Evan Smith and his then-girlfriend Casey Campbell went on the show Temptation Island. Now, about this decision to put his relationship through this absolutely ridiculous test that nobody ever passes and it never works, Evan said, quote, "We're at a crossroads. I love Casey, but is she the one? We went on the show to test that, but also my dad cheated on my mom. I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't the same, that I could be faithful and happy," end quote. So how did that go, Evan? Well, before going on the show, Evan and Casey had been dating for almost 10 years. While there on Temptation Island, Evan quickly forgot that he wanted to be loyal and happy, and he fell for another contestant, a woman named Morgan Lowler. He then broke up with Casey, moved in with Morgan, and proposed to her 6 months later. But a year into the engagement, Morgan and Evan broke up, and Morgan went public with accusations, including that Evan had lied to her and led her to believe he was a multimillionaire who owned several restaurants. She then went on to pay for everything the entire time that they were together, with assurances from him that he would be able to take over the financial responsibilities when he gained access to his father's trust in 2020. But it turned out that this was a lie, allegedly. So she asked him to get a job and go to therapy, as well as pay her back for all the money she'd given him, but he refused. And later, she went through his phone and found out he was planning to steal her engagement ring that he'd given her and then move in with another friend of his in LA. Even after all this, Morgan still decided to give Evan a chance, but in the end, it didn't work out. Surprise, surprise. Surprise to nobody. it's Temptation Island. And this just all happened recently, like over this past summer. So it's just really kind of a sad story. There's no happy endings here. There's no happily ever after on Temptation Island. There's no happily ever after when you're sleeping with a violent drug dealer's wife. But what do you guys think of all this? Do you believe any of John Creech's version of the story at all? Do you think he planned to do this, or do you think it really was in the heat of the moment? He was already in a lot of legal trouble, and as far as I know, he's never been accused of killing anyone before. Would he really go out of his way to kill a guy who was seeing his wife, even though he'd allegedly already moved on with a high school girl? Did he want both Chandrika and his high school girl, even though he alleged that she was a horrible alcoholic? Was John Creech's pride hurt enough to the point where he would take someone's life and dig himself further into a legal hole? I think the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle between John's story and Chandrika's story because, I mean, let's be honest. The only three people who were there that night was John Creech, Chandrika Creech, and Gavin Smith. And Gavin Smith did not make it out of that parking lot alive. So we have two people who aren't the most reliable characters who are telling us what happened, and their version of the stories are very different, like almost completely opposite. A lot of what Chandrika said didn't make sense. Like in her story, she didn't say that John Creech had thrown her keys into the bushes, so I was wondering, why would you take the Mazda instead of your own car to, like, escape? She claimed it was the car that was closest enough, but if John was busy beating on Gavin, she probably could have safely made it to her Audi. But if she didn't have her keys, that explains why she took the Mazda. But she never said in her story that John had thrown her keys into the bushes. Now, if the part where John threw her keys into the bushes is true, then maybe she was drunk, because why else would he throw her keys into the bushes? But it's all just very sketchy. I don't know who to believe. And like I said, I think that the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But you have a lot of people who got immunity in this case who were very involved in it. And that's kind of disturbing. And it's sad because, Lisa lost her husband. Even though he was cheating on her and he was unfaithful, she still loved him so much and she didn't want it to be over. She didn't want to get divorced. She just wanted to show him, like, you have to make a decision about whether you want to be this guy who is trying to be an actor in his 50s and is, dating other women or, going out there and just being with other people, or do you want to be a family man who's here for your kids and here for your wife? You have to make a decision on who you want to be. And if you make the decision that you want to be here with us, then I'll work with you on that. So it's just very sad that she lost her husband. And she said, for a while after that when he was missing, before they knew he was dead, she kept expecting him to just walk into the house at any moment and say, yeah, I just needed some time to let off some steam. I just needed some time to myself. And she was just hoping he would show up and say that. And obviously he never did. So it's very sad. But let me know what you guys think about this case in the comments section. Have you ever heard of it? I was surprised. I really hadn't heard of it before. I stumbled upon it and then started doing research on it. But it's just such a strange and intriguing case and very sad. So have you guys ever heard of this case? What do you think? Do you believe Chandrika or do you believe John? Do you, like me, think that the truth is someplace in the middle? What do you think about Evan Smith and his Temptation Island career? What's up with that? Let me know in the comment section. Make sure to like this video if you liked it. Make sure to share it if you think it's worth sharing. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. And if you are already subscribed, make sure to check and make sure you still are, because YouTube loves to unsubscribe people from my channel. Remember to follow me on Instagram and Twitter, and also check out my new podcast, which is premiering December 4th. It's called Crime Weekly. The link for that will also be in the description box. And don't forget to check out Harry's if you're looking for an amazing Christmas gift for yourself or somebody else. I keep saying a Christmas gift for yourself. Like, is it really a Christmas? Yes, it is. If you buy yourself something for Christmas, it's a Christmas gift for yourself, and you should buy yourself a Christmas gift. Thank you guys so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye.
Straight down, and that river runs deep. The mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name. Better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's killing you slowly. It's all you got to let it go.